Hey everyone, this is HFY Galactic Empire Fall. Human-made stories, no AI noise. Because HFY needs humanity. Subscribe, and let's begin. I'm She-Candy. The calibration strip on the edge of the table had lifted by less than a finger's width. Seelan noticed it while waiting for the archive drawer to finish its slow, mechanical return. The strip had been pressed flat that morning. She knew because she had smoothed it herself with the side of her thumb while reading intake reports. Now one corner stood away from the metal, straight and pale under the light, as if the adhesive had changed its mind. She pressed it down again. Across from her, Ivan did not look up. He was bent over the drawer, housing with a driver in one hand and a folded inspection sheet under his wrist to keep the oil from the table. He tightened one recessed screw, set the driver beside the sheet, then drew the drawer open and closed twice with both hands. He watched the rails, not the box. Left side still drags, Seelan said. He opened it again, slower this time. The drawer moved in, stopped, then completed the last 2 centimeters after a delay that made the motion look reluctant. He nodded once. The object inside lay where station procedure required it to lie, centered in a foam cradle, sealed in a transparent evidence sleeve, tagged with a black marker line and 3 times stamps. The tag used the expedition's translation standard, but the handwriting beneath it belonged to the retrieval pilot who had found it in the collapsed relay shelter on the planet's surface. Paper book. Human origin. Found in compartment beneath manual hatch. Seelan reached for the sleeve, but stopped before touching it. You read more. Ivan slid the driver into his belt loop and pulled the inspection sheet free. There was a dark crescent on the paper where oil had soaked through. He folded it once, exactly on the existing crease, and set it to the right of the tray. Enough to confirm it's not synthetic replication, he said. Fiber breakdown matches age. Handwritten sections are original. Seelan stood still for a moment, looking at the book through the sleeve. It was smaller than she had expected from the first report. A practical size. Dark cover. Corners worn pale. The elastic band that once kept it closed had lost tension and rested loose around the back. There were species across the Accord who built memory into crystal, resonance, skin, scent. Humans, according to the recovered records, had once trusted paper with things they did not want systems to correct. She pulled out a chair and sat. The chair gave the faint scrape it always gave against the floor seam. That sound had become part of the room over the last 6 months, along with the air vent above the archive door and the thin buzz of an old panel light that maintenance never replaced, because it still worked. Ivan took the seat opposite her, but did not settle back. He remained forward, forearms on knees, watching the sealed book. Seelan unlatched the sleeve. Nothing happened. No warning. No hidden mechanism. Only the soft release of static from the plastic edge. She slid the book out carefully and set it on the table between them. The cover had no title. The surface looked almost matte until the light struck it sideways and showed the place's skin and handling had polished. Ivan held out a pair of thin gloves. She took them. He did not bother with a second pair for himself. That was typical. He trusted his hands to remember what they had touched. Seelan opened the cover. The first page contained a name written in dark ink, then crossed out. Beneath it, another name, smaller. A date format she recognized from human civil records. Then a line in a hand steadier than the rest. If this is being read by someone who still believes dates are fixed, you are already late. Neither of them moved. The vent above the archive door gave a short metallic tick before resuming its low air rush. Seelan turned the page. The first pages were ordinary in the way recovered human materials sometimes were. Supply lists. 3 names. A rough sketch of a docking frame. Notes about food rotation and a complaint about filtration grit getting into water lines. The writing shifted between practical and private without warning. That also matched the little they knew of personal human records. They did not always divide the useful from the intimate. Ivan leaned in, one hand flat on the table. Page corners. She looked up. He pointed. Several page corners had been folded in. Not bookmarks. Markers. Deliberate. Seelan turned to the first folded page. The handwriting there was less steady. We ran the sequence again at 2:14 station time. Same result. Not a probability band. Not a trend. A date. Turn says the system is echoing inputs, but the system has never invented a funeral marker before. I asked it to strip cultural formatting. It returned the same date, without symbols. Below that, in smaller writing. If anyone finds this after, don't tell me we panicked. We kept working. Ivan lifted the inspection sheet and placed it under the open page to keep the binding from straining. The movement was precise, almost tender, though there was nothing in his face to match the care. Funeral marker, he said. Translation confident. On the word, yes. On the implication, no. Seelan looked down again. Human script had always taken concentration. The characters did not flow like a chord standard. They looked built, not grown. Each line a decision. She turned another page. Diagrams this time. Rings inside rings. Arrows. Notations near what might have been a sensor array or a predictive model. One section had been underlined so hard the pressure marked the next 2 pages. The machine is not forecasting collapse. It is placing us inside one. Ivan reached across her line of sight and stopped with one finger near the margin, careful not to touch the ink. Here, there was a list beside the paragraph. Habitat breach. Reactor isolation. 7 confirmed. Transmission failure. External record persists. Seelan read it twice, then turned back to the cover as if the plainness there might help. This was written during an event, she said, or before one. She did not answer. The station clock on the wall rolled over a minute in silence. The digits changed with a slight delay between the 10s and 1s places. Maintenance had recalibrated it twice. The delay always came back. Seelan turned to the next folded page. This time the entry was dated later. The writing wandered down the page, tightened, corrected itself. We tested against 3 calendars and a null count. Same endpoint. Same interval drift when observed directly. Shorter when logged automatically. I told Mara not to say extinction out loud because the room was getting smaller every time she did. That was a joke. She didn't laugh. At the bottom, human extinction date, August 14th, 2187. Beneath it, after a line break, correction, not human extinction. Local observer extinction. I wish that helped. The light above the table hummed once, then steadied. Ivan sat back. His chair made no sound. He had learned where the floor seemed caught and avoided it without looking. Seelan kept her hands on either side of the book. Read the date again. He did. She let the numbers settle. Station reference? Maybe. No. Read the script form. He glanced down. Internal notation. Human civilian. Day, month, cycle year. Yes. She nodded once, almost to herself. Translated against archived human conversion. Ivan stood and crossed to the wall terminal. He did not rush. That was the first thing Seelan had noticed about him when he arrived from Logistics Command 3 years ago. He moved like a person who believed speed was expensive and should be paid for only when necessary. He keyed the numbers in manually. The terminal took a second longer than usual to answer. A faint delay line moved across the screen before resolving into a chord standard. Seelan watched his shoulders, not the display. He said, "Conversion complete." She waited. Ivan turned. "Narf survey cycle," he said. "Accord date line." He read the station date aloud. It was today. For a moment the room seemed arranged too carefully. The table centered beneath the light. The open book resting on the inspection sheet. The calibration strip flat again at the edge. Even the air from the vent arrived in measured intervals, enough to stir the loose corner of the evidence tag, but not enough to move it from place. Seelan stood up, then sat down again. Could be coincidence. Could be inserted later. Could be translation contamination. He came back to the table and looked at the page without touching it. Could be. Neither of them said the other thing. Seelan turned 3 pages forward. More diagrams. A name repeated. Mara likely. Then a block of text written harder than the rest. We argued for an hour about whether recording the date would make it fixed. Turn wanted to destroy the printouts. Mar wanted to send a warning to anyone using the outer relays. I wrote it down because if something is coming from memory, I want paper to have to watch it happen. She swallowed once, dryly, and kept reading. The machine doesn't predict deaths. It identifies who becomes necessary to produce them. Ivan's hand went to the back of Seelan's chair, Not touching, only bracing against it. That's not extinction, he said. No, it's selection. She looked up at him. Or manipulation. He was already thinking past the page. She could see it in the angle of his head, the stillness that came over him when he began sorting options. Quarantine, authentication, restricted report chain, cross-checking with surface recovery logs, pulling names from the current station roster against the names in the diary. Quietly, before rumor converted information into behavior, Seelan returned to the book. Near the bottom of the page was a line written smaller than the rest, almost hidden in the gutter where the binding curved inward. She tilted the page toward the light. The ink there had faded, but not beyond reading. If this reaches the station, the diplomat will want to tell the truth, and the engineer will want to contain it. Let the engineer lock the doors first. Then ask who left the diary, where it could survive. The room held for a second after that, as if waiting to see whether either of them would move. Ivan removed his hand from the chair and went straight to the door panel. He keyed the archive into internal lockdown. The lock engaged with a soft click, nothing dramatic, only a changed pressure in the frame and a narrow red line above the seal. Seelan did not look away from the page. She heard him cross to the wall terminal, pull surface recovery coordinates, open the chain of custody record, heard the inspection sheet being lifted from beneath the book, because he needed to check something written on its reverse. Heard him stop. What? She said. No answer. Only the vent and the light, and the faint drag of his thumb over paper. Then he brought the sheet beside the diary, and laid it flat. The oil stain had spread while they were reading. It had reached the handwritten retrieval node, and blurred one line, but not enough to hide it. The original shelter coordinates were still visible. So was the timestamp. Seelan leaned closer. Recovery had been logged 8 hours before the pilot's shuttle ever landed on the surface. No one spoke. On the table, the edge of the calibration strip lifted again, slowly enough to notice only because both of them were already watching for small things. Ivan did not touch the diary again until he had checked the archive camera buffer twice. He stood at the wall terminal, one hand braced against the frame, and ran the last 12 hours backward in silence. Seelan stayed at the table. She turned no more pages. The book remained open on the inspection sheet, its spine slightly lifted, as if the object itself were waiting for permission to continue. The camera feed showed the archive room in its usual sequence of small routines. Seelan entering with intake folders, Ivan kneeling by the drawer housing, the evidence sleeve placed on the table. Empty room. Light shift from station cycle dimming. Empty room again. Nothing arrived early. No one entered before the logged recovery. No book appeared where there had been none. Ivan replayed the section a third time, slower. The feed stuttered at the moment the archive drawer first opened. Not long. Less than a second. When motion returned, the table was unchanged. The evidence sleeve still lay sealed where he had left it. Buffer fault. Seelan asked. He did not answer at once. He enlarged the time code and ran it frame by frame. The clock skipped, he said. On the camera? On the recorder. She looked over her shoulder toward him. Can the archive recorder do that? It can fail. That wasn't the question. He let the feed run forward again. The room on screen was plain and familiar. The same table, the same strip along the edge, the same light with a slight pulse every 7 or 8 minutes. Nothing in the image suggested that a clock could be persuaded to step over a piece of time without anyone in the room noticing the missing section. Ivan shut the feed and returned to the table. He took the folded inspection sheet, turned it over, and read the recovery chain line by line. Pilot signed this surface side, he said. After retrieval. Yes, but the timestamp says before descent. Yes, they stayed with that. Seelan watched him read the same 4 lines again. He moved one finger under the writing. Not like a person searching for meaning, but like someone checking if the letters themselves had shifted positions since the last pass. When he finished, he aligned the sheet with the table edge and smoothed the oil-softened paper flat. That note about the engineer, she said. He looked at her. In the diary. I read it. It wasn't broad. It was specific. Enough to make you uncomfortable. He placed the sheet beside the book, perfectly parallel to the spine. Enough to make me stop assuming the writer was talking generally. Seelan lowered her eyes to the open page again. The line in the gutter had not changed. The faded ink sat in its narrow curve as if it had always known where their attention would land. She reached for the next folded corner. Ivan said, "Wait." She stopped. He pulled a small field scanner from his belt and set it on the table. It was not made for literature or archaeology. It was for seals, residues, volatile traces left by containers or tools. He held it above the paper and moved it slowly across the margins, then the center of the page, then the cover. The scanner gave a soft pulse, then a series of short neutral tones. No active compounds, no embedded signal, no reactive coding. When he passed it over the binding, it paused a fraction too long before clearing. "Adhesive residue," he said. "Recent. Not recent enough to matter." He checked the page edge, where the corner had been folded. Then he powered the scanner down and set it farther from the book than necessary, as if removing one more variable from the field around it. "Now," he said. Seelan unfolded the corner. The paper had been handled more often here. The crease had softened. The entry began neatly and ended with words running into one another near the bottom. Mara asked whether extinction can begin as paperwork. Tern said every extinction begins as paperwork somewhere, if the species is organized enough. That was not useful. The relay keeps generating audit gaps. Files arrive before transfer. Maintenance clears faults no one reported. We are beginning to leave records of actions none of us remembers taking. Below that, in the left margin, a later note angled downward. "Do not trust sequence. Trust accumulation." Seelan read it twice, then glanced at the inspection sheet. Ivan had already made the same connection. "Accumulation of what?" she said. "Objects. Actions. Small deviations." She looked around the archive. Table. Drawer. Terminal. Light. The lifted strip. The room had not become strange. That would have been easier. It remained itself. Only certain details had begun to hold too still, as if waiting to be named. Seelan touched the corner of the evidence sleeve. What if the diary isn't predicting a date? Ivan said nothing. What if it records the station learning how to arrive at 1? He looked at the page again. Then we don't circulate it. She almost smiled, but didn't. Of course. He took a thin marker from the drawer unit and wrote 3 words on the back of the inspection sheet. No external notice. Then he capped the marker and set it directly above the writing. Not clipped, just resting there. "Temporary," he said. "Everything is temporary." Not a philosophy. A classification. Seelan stood and walked to the wall cabinet for water. The dispenser always hesitated before releasing the first measure, and today it did the same. A metal taste. Slightly colder than usual. She drank half and brought the cup back with her, placing it on the table near the scanner. The cup left a pale ring almost immediately. That bothered her more than it should have. The table surface was coated against condensation. It never marked this quickly. Ivan noticed her looking and took out a clean cloth from the maintenance kit. He folded it into quarters, placed it beside the cup, and did not wipe the ring away. "Leave it," he said. She understood. Evidence, even if they did not know of what. She sat again. The chair caught the floor seam and gave it small scrape. Same sound as before. That steadied her more than the water had. She turned the page. This section had fewer diagrams. More prose. Not polished. Not confessional either. A working mind on paper. We tried removing the date from the system. It returned in inventory labels. We wiped the labels. It appeared in maintenance rotation. We suspended maintenance rotation. It turned up in meal allotment batching, then in thermal output reports, then in the spacing between backup pulses on the archive lights. Mara said maybe the station had stopped reporting facts and started organizing itself around 1. Seelan's gaze shifted upward. The light above them hummed softly. Ivan followed her eyes, then checked the wall panel. Backup pulse interval is standard. Is it? He looked at her, then at the diary, then at the panel again. He did not answer immediately, which meant he was rerunning the last hour in his head. Seelan could almost see the sequence form behind his face. Entering room, opening drawer, reading cover, locking door. Light behavior folded into action without being noticed. He went to the cabinet and pulled a portable timing strip from the second shelf. It was an old instrument, transparent and narrow, used mostly when digital lag made local confirmation easier. He placed it beneath the light and activated the line. A sequence of tiny markers moved across it with even spacing. For 20 seconds, nothing was wrong. Then one gap widened. Not by much. A fraction. Another 6 markers passed. Another widened interval. Ivan reset the strip and did it again. Same pattern. He wrote the count on the cloth beside the cup ring. Seelan watched the numbers appear. You think the diary planted the expectation. I think the light is pulsing wrong. That wasn't my question. He folded the cloth once and set it under the cup. No, she accepted that. He was not a man who wasted certainty on causes, when the behavior itself could still be measured. She turned another page. This one had names. Not the earlier 3 from the supply list. New names. Longer list. 22 in all. Some crossed out. Some circled. Besides 6 of them were short notes that looked like station roles. Mediation. Structural. Relay. Medical. Systems. External survey. At the bottom of the list, one line had been added later, squeezed into the last strip of page. 2 are always enough if they find the record early. The handwriting there was steadier than anywhere else in the diary. Ivan came back to the table before she asked. Count current station complement. She did it from memory first. 13 permanent. For temporary survey personnel. 2 dock techs waiting transfer. 1 medical rotation officer. 19. Include shuttle crew in Bay 3, he said. 21. He nodded toward the list. Roles. Seelan scanned down the page. Not names. Functions. That was worse in a way. Names could be coincidence. Roles suggested architecture. We have mediation, she said quietly. Structural, yes. Relay, yes. Medical, systems, external survey. Ivan was already at the terminal again, pulling current assignments without opening the wider personnel net. He kept the query local. 1 room, 1 station segment, 1 screen. The result confirmed what both of them knew. 6 roles matched exactly. He closed the screen before any alert chain could notice the access pattern. We could still be fitting ourselves into it, Seelan said. He nodded. Then we stopped fitting. How? He looked at the list on the page. Break sequence. She considered that. The diary itself had told them not to trust sequence. Trust accumulation. If the station was gathering small adjustments, then simple refusal might not matter. Something more precise would be needed. Not resistance. Diversion. Ivan pulled the marker back and wrote a second line under the first. Reassign visible tasks. Seelan added another beneath his. Do not share source text. They both looked at the page again. The diplomat will want to tell the truth, she said. The engineer will want to contain it. She folded the page corner back down. Not sharply, just enough to mark their place. A sound came through the door panel. Not a knock. More a pause in the corridor that allowed the pressure seal to register weight outside. Someone standing still close to the frame. Neither of them moved. The archive room had no reason to receive visitors at this cycle point. Intake was over. Maintenance was internal. The lockdown line above the door remained red. The panel chirped once with a passive query. Access request pending. Ivan stepped toward it, but did not open the channel. He checked the external hall camera first. The corridor showed only one figure. Medical Officer Rail, holding a narrow tray and reading something on a wrist slate. No sign of urgency. No backup. Why is medical here? Seelan asked. Ivan enlarged the tray image. A stack of sleep cycle patches. Routine distribution. He looked at the diary, then at Seelan. Without speaking, they understood the same thing. In the diary, medical had been one of the roles. Outside, Rail raised a hand toward the panel, then lowered it again and waited. Patient, polite, the kind of waiting people do when they believe they are interrupting ordinary work. Ivan muted the external chime before it could repeat. Seelan rose, taking the diary in both hands. She slipped it back into the evidence sleeve, but did not seal it. The cover brushed the plastic with a small dry sound. She placed it inside the archive drawer. Ivan closed the drawer halfway, then reopened it, then closed it fully. The left side still dragged. He locked the housing manually. The red access line above the door stayed lit. In the corridor, Rail remained where he was, one hand under the tray, the other at his side, waiting, not impatient. From this angle, he seemed to be looking at his own reflection in the dark hall glass, rather than at the archive door itself. Seelan noticed something then. On his wrist slate, angled toward the camera for only a second, was a date line. The numbers were too small to read cleanly, but the layout was wrong for medical rotation software. Too centered, too formal, more like a notice than a schedule. Ivan saw it too. He froze the frame, sharpened it, and the digits resolved slowly into focus. Not today's date, tomorrow's. Under it, in smaller script, one word: confirmed. Neither of them spoke. The cloth under Seelan's water cup darkened as the ring spread through it in a perfect circle. The door stayed closed. Rail did not knock. After a while, he shifted his weight once, the tray tilting a few degrees before settling back to level. The sleep cycle patches did not slide. They were arranged too precisely for that. Inside the archive, Ivan stepped away from the panel and crossed back to the table. He did not look at Seelan when he spoke. "We opened nothing," he said. She nodded. He took the marker again and drew a thin line beneath the two earlier notes on the inspection sheet, separating them from what came next. Then he wrote, "Delay all routine contact." He kept the marker and set it in the same place as before, exactly above the words. Seelan watched the line of writing for a second, then reached for the diary drawer. Ivan's hand came down on the housing before she touched it. Not yet. She left her hand where it was, hovering just above the metal. "We don't have to read it to act." "No," he said, "but we need to know what it expects." "What it expects," she repeated. He did not answer. He removed his hand from the housing and instead checked the seam where the drawer met the frame, pressing lightly along the left side where it dragged. The motion was careful, almost habitual, a way of measuring something physical when the rest of the room had begun to feel less reliable. Seelan pulled her hand back. She turned toward the wall terminal instead. If the diary is right about accumulation, then this isn't about a single event. It's about alignment. Ivan glanced at her. "Alignment of what?" he asked. "Small things," she said. "Schedules, records, movements. Things that don't matter until they all point the same way." He nodded once, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement that the idea could be tested. Seelan opened a narrow diagnostic panel on the terminal. Not the main system. Something local, quiet, not designed to trigger logs outside the room. She began listing recent anomalies: camera delay, timestamp mismatch, light pulse drift, early recovery record. She left space between each line. Ivan watched her write. "Don't group them," he said. "I'm not. Leave them separate." "I know." She paused after the fourth entry, then added a fifth. "External personnel present without request." Neither of them looked at the door. The panel chirped once again, softer this time, as if adjusting its volume to match the silence inside the room. Rail still waited. Seelan closed the diagnostic panel without saving. Ivan noticed that. "You didn't log it." "No." "Why?" "Because logging is sequence." He considered that, then gave a short nod. Outside, Rail shifted again. This time he raised his wrist slightly, bringing the slate closer to his face. The camera caught a clearer angle of the display. The date line had changed. Not by much. One digit. Seelan leaned toward the screen. "It's moving." Ivan slowed the feed and stepped through it frame by frame. The number in the day position advanced, then returned, then advanced again, but not at regular intervals. The changes were not tied to station time. They seemed to follow something else, something not visible in the feed. "Not a clock," Ivan said. "No," Seelan replied. "A count." "Of what?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned back to the table and pulled the inspection sheet closer. She looked at the 3 lines they had written, then added a fourth beneath them. "Observe without responding." Ivan watched her write it, then took the marker and added one more line. "Do not confirm patterns." He set the marker down again. They stood there for a moment, both looking at the same sheet of paper, as if it might change if left unwatched. Seelan moved first. She crossed to the door panel and opened a narrow audio channel. No video, No unlock. Medical, she said, her voice level. State purpose. Rail's reply came after a short pause. Routine distribution. Leave it outside. Another pause. Slightly longer. Understood, Rail said. His footsteps moved away, soft against the corridor floor. The panel registered his departure, with a faint shift in pressure. Ivan closed the channel. Neither of them spoke until the corridor feed showed empty again. Seelan exhaled once, quietly, and returned to the table. He didn't insist, she said. No, that's not normal. No. She sat down. The chair scraped lightly, the same small sound as before. Ivan did not sit. He moved to the archive drawer and opened it a few centimeters, then closed it again, as if confirming it was still there. It was. The evidence sleeve caught the light for a second through the narrow gap, then disappeared as the drawer sealed. Seelan watched him. You're checking consistency, she said. Yes. Is it consistent? For now. She nodded. Then she reached for the cup. The cloth beneath it had absorbed most of the ring, but a faint outline remained on the table surface, darker than before. She lifted the cup, hesitated, then set it down a few centimeters to the left. The ring did not move. She stared at it. Ivan noticed. It's just moisture, he said. No, she replied softly. It's placement. He stepped closer. The ring was exactly where the cup had been, unchanged in size or shape, as if it had fixed itself to the surface rather than spread through it. Seelan moved the cup again, this time farther. A second ring formed beneath it, identical to the first. Two circles now, side by side, neither fading. Ivan took the cloth and pressed it lightly against the first ring. When he lifted it, the cloth was damp, but the ring remained. He pressed harder. No change. He stopped. Leave it, he said. Seelan nodded. They both stepped back from the table slightly, not in fear, but in adjustment, giving the object space, as if distance might clarify it. The light above them pulsed again. This time the delay was longer. Ivan checked the timing strip. The intervals had widened further. Not evenly. Two normal, one extended. Two normal, one extended. A pattern, but not a simple one. Seelan turned toward the wall terminal again. If the diary is right, then the station is reorganizing itself around a fixed point. He said nothing, and we're part of that organization. Still nothing. She looked at him. What if we stop being useful? He met her gaze. That's not how systems work. Then we make ourselves irrelevant. He considered it. How? Change roles, she said. Break alignment. He nodded slowly. Reassign visible tasks, he repeated, glancing at the inspection sheet. Seelan stood. I'll take structural, she said. You're not structural. I will be. He shook his head slightly. That's not enough. No, she agreed, but it's a start. He moved to the terminal and opened a local task board, one that would not propagate changes beyond the station segment. He reassigned her to structural inspection, assigned himself to mediation. The changes took effect immediately. No alerts, no resistance. That bothered him more than if the system had refused. Seelan watched the update appear. Too easy, she said. Yes. They stood there, both aware that they had just altered something, but unsure whether the alteration mattered. Ivan closed the task board. Now we wait, he said. Seelan nodded. They returned to the table. The diary remained in the drawer. The inspection sheet lay flat, its 4 lines of instruction unchanged. The 2 rings on the table surface held their shape. The light pulsed again. The vent ticked once, then resumed its steady flow. For a while, nothing else happened. Then the archive drawer shifted. Not fully. Just enough for the left side to move outward a few millimeters before stopping. Neither of them touched it. They watched. The drawer stayed there, slightly open, as if it had decided to stop halfway through a motion it had not been asked to make. Seelan stepped closer. Ivan, she said quietly. He was already beside her. The gap was small, but through it, the edge of the evidence sleeve was visible. And something else. A corner of paper. Not the diary page they had last seen. This one was lighter, newer. Seelan reached for the handle, then stopped. Don't, Ivan said. She froze. They both leaned in, just enough to see without moving the drawer. The new page was not inside the diary. It was between the sleeve and the foam cradle. Loose. Unsealed. Seelan tilted her head, adjusting her angle. There was writing on it. Different hand. Cleaner. Printed, not written. She read it aloud, softly. Update. Local observer count reduced to 2. Confirmation pending. Neither of them moved. The drawer did not close. The light above them pulsed once more. And this time, the delay did not return to normal. The drawer remained where it had stopped. Not open. Not closed. Held between positions as if the mechanism had found a third state it preferred. Seelan lowered her hand from the handle and stepped back. The new page inside the drawer did not move. It lay at a slight angle against the sleeve. One corner lifted where it caught the foam. Ivan circled to the other side of the table. Angle, he said. Seelan followed his line of sight. The page was not aligned with the drawer edges. It sat off by a few degrees, enough to notice, without measuring. That, more than the content, felt deliberate. He crouched slightly, bringing his eyes level with the gap. If we open it, we confirm placement. If we don't, she said, it stays where it is. He nodded. They stood like that for a while, watching a piece of paper that did not belong to the sequence of actions they had taken. Seelan moved first. She picked up the cloth from under the cup and folded it again, reducing it to a smaller square. Then she placed it on the table directly in front of the drawer, not touching it, just marking a line. Ivan noticed. A boundary, he said. Reference, she corrected. He accepted that. She sat down again, the chair giving it small scrape. The sound felt more precise now, as if it had been measured against something else in the room and found to be consistent. Ivan remained standing. Read it again, he said. Seelan leaned forward slightly, keeping her hands on her knees. Update. Local observer count reduced to 2. Confirmation pending. She spoke each word at the same pace. No emphasis. No interpretation. When she finished, she leaned back. Local observer, she said. Us, Ivan replied. Or anyone still recording. He glanced at the inspection sheet. We are recording. On paper. Yes. She looked at the diary drawer again. Then the count is accurate. He did not answer. Instead, he walked to the wall terminal and opened the internal personnel list again. He did not expand it. He did not search. He simply let it sit there, a block of names and roles. Count them, Seelan said. He did. Out loud. The number came to 21. Unchanged. Now count active interactions, she said. He frowned slightly. Define. People who have directly engaged with this room since the diary arrived. He thought about it. Pilot, he said. But only through the record. Not direct. No. Continue. He counted again, slower. Us, he said finally. 2. He closed the list. The screen went dark. Neither of them spoke. Seelan reached for the inspection sheet and added another line beneath the others. Limit interaction scope. She set the marker down and aligned it with the previous placement. Ivan watched her hand as she adjusted it by a fraction of a centimeter. Precision matters, he said. Yes. They both looked at the drawer again. The page inside had not shifted. The light above them pulsed. The delay held. Ivan returned to the table and sat down for the first time, since the drawer had moved. His chair made no sound. He placed both hands flat on the table, fingers spread slightly, as if grounding himself through the surface. Test, he said. Seelan nodded. He pointed at the cloth. Move it. She did. She slid it 2 centimeters to the left. The movement was smooth, controlled. The cloth stopped exactly where she intended. Nothing else in the room responded. Again, he said. She moved it back. Same result. Ivan watched the drawer. No change. Now the cup, he said. Seelan hesitated, then reached for it. She lifted it, paused, then set it down in a new position, farther from the rings. A third ring formed beneath it, identical to the others. She did not react. She simply observed. 3 placements, Ivan said. Yes. Fixed outcomes. Yes. He leaned back slightly. Now the drawer. Seelan looked at him. We don't touch it, she said. No, he agreed. We change something else. He stood again and walked to the terminal. He opened the local task board. The reassigned roles were still in place. Seelan, structural. Ivan, mediation. He changed them again. Seelan to medical. Himself to external survey. He closed the board. They both watched the drawer. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the gap shifted. Not wider. Narrower. By a fraction. Seelan leaned forward. It responded. Yes. To roll change. Or to timing. She considered that. Do it again, she said. He reopened the board. This time he assigned both of them to no roll. Unlisted. The system accepted it without comment. He closed the board. They waited. The drawer did not move. The page inside remained at the same angle. The light pulsed again. The delay stretched further. Seelan exhaled quietly. Not immediate, she said. No. Accumulation. He nodded. She looked at the inspection sheet. 4 lines. Then a 5th. Disrupt accumulation paths. She wrote it slowly. Then set the marker down. Ivan took the cloth and moved it again. This time he placed it over the first ring. The ring remained visible beneath it. He pressed lightly. No change. He lifted the cloth. The ring was still there. Unchanged. Persistence, he said. Yes. They both looked at the table. 3 rings. 1 cloth. 1 cup. Each object holding its position without drift. Seelan stood. I'm going to the door, she said. Ivan did not stop her. She walked to the panel and opened the corridor feed again. Empty. No one waiting. No tray. No slate. She switched to the adjacent corridor. Also empty. She closed the feed. Rail is gone, she said. Yes. But the slate showed tomorrow. Yes. She turned back to the room. What if the count isn't about people? Ivan looked at her. What else would it be? Observers, she said. Not individuals. Instances. He considered that. Define instance. Each point of reference that confirms the pattern. He glanced at the table. The rings. Yes. The drawer. Yes. The light. Yes. He nodded slowly. Then we're not reducing observers, he said. We're increasing them. Seelan looked at the inspection sheet. Unless we stop confirming. He met her eyes. How? She stepped back to the table and turned the inspection sheet over. The oil stain had spread further, softening the edges of the earlier writing. She placed the sheet face down. Remove the record, she said. Ivan watched her. That doesn't remove the action. No, she said, but it removes the reference. He considered it. Then he reached for the timing strip and powered it down. The markers disappeared. He set it aside. Seelan picked up the cup and emptied the remaining water into the sink. She brought it back and set it upside down on the table. The ring beneath it remained, but no new ring formed. They both noticed. State change, Ivan said. Yes. Not placement. Correct. He nodded. They both looked at the drawer again. The page inside had not moved. The angle remained the same. Seelan stepped closer. I'm going to read it again, she said. From here, Ivan replied. She leaned in, careful not to cross the cloth boundary. Update. Local observer count reduced to 2. Confirmation pending. She straightened. Pending, she said. Yes. Not complete. He nodded. They stood there, both aware that something had not finished. The light pulsed again. This time, the delay did not return. It held. Steady. No variation. Ivan looked up. Fixed, he said. Seelan followed his gaze. The light no longer shifted. It had settled into a constant interval. No drift. No delay. She looked back at the drawer. The gap narrowed another fraction. Not closing. Not opening. Adjusting. Confirmation, she said. Yes. Pending. He did not respond. Instead, he walked to the door panel and placed his hand on it. Not to open it, just to feel the surface. The panel was warm. Warmer than before. He kept his hand there for a moment, then removed it. Temperature shift, he said. Seelan nodded. Another instance. He looked at her. How many now? She counted silently. More than 2. He nodded. They both turned back to the table. The drawer. The page. The rings. The cloth. The cup. The light. All present. All stable. All observed. Seelan reached for the cloth again. This time, she folded it once more and placed it over the edge of the drawer, covering the gap, without touching it. Ivan watched. Obscure, he said. Yes. They waited. Nothing moved. The drawer remained in its half-state. The page inside was no longer visible. The light held steady. The rings did not fade. Seelan stepped back. Now we reduce, she said. Ivan nodded. How, he asked. She looked around the room. Then she reached for the wall terminal and powered it down. The screen went dark. The hum of the system reduced slightly. One instance gone. Ivan took the timing strip and placed it in the cabinet. Another instance removed. They both stood still. The room felt quieter. Not empty. Just less defined. Seelan looked at the cloth covering the drawer. Then at Ivan. Now we wait, she said. He nodded. They stood in silence. No movement. No adjustment. No confirmation. The light remained steady. The drawer did not shift. The rings held their shape. For a long time, nothing happened. Then slowly, the cloth at the edge of the drawer lifted. Not by air. Not by touch. It rose just enough to reveal the gap again. And the page inside. But the text had changed. Seelan leaned in. Carefully. She read it. Update. Local observer count unstable. Recalculation in progress. She straightened. Neither of them spoke. The light above them pulsed once. Then stopped. The light did not return to its rhythm. It held a constant brightness that felt less like illumination and more like a decision not to vary. Seelan noticed first that the hum beneath it had gone. The faint thread of sound she had been using, without knowing to measure intervals, was no longer there. The room had lost one way of telling time. Ivan looked up at the fixture, then back to the table. Remove another, he said. Seelan nodded. She walked to the cabinet and opened it without switching on the interior light. Her hand moved along the shelf by memory until it found the timing strip. She hesitated, then closed the cabinet again, leaving the strip inside. Not that, she said. What then? She crossed to the chair she had been using and lifted it by the back, clearing it from the floor seam that always caught. She carried it 2 steps to the side and set it down, so it no longer aligned with the table. The scrape did not happen. Ivan watched the floor, where the seam ran. Alignment change, he said. Yes. They both looked at the drawer. The gap held. The page remained visible. No shift. Seelan returned to the table and stood instead of sitting. I'm not going to sit again, she said. Ivan nodded once. He reached for the inspection sheet, then stopped and withdrew his hand. Leave it face down, he said. Yes. He took a step back from the table. Another. He positioned himself near the wall, outside the immediate circle of objects they had been using as reference. Seelan noticed and mirrored him, moving to the opposite side. The table now sat between them, unoccupied. The drawer half open, the cloth partly lifted, the page inside, the rings, the cup inverted, the inspection sheet face down. A small arrangement of things that had accumulated into something more than themselves. They waited. No one spoke. After a while, Ivan said, Count again. Seelan did not look at him. Objects or observers? Both. She scanned the room slowly. Table, she said. Drawer. Page. Cloth. Cup. Rings. Sheet. Light. Door. Terminal off. Cabinet. She stopped. Us, Ivan added. She nodded. That's more than 2. Yes. Unstable, he said. She glanced at the page. Recalculation, she replied. They stood in silence again. Then Seelan moved. She walked to the door panel and placed her hand on it. Not to open, just to feel the surface again. Cooler now. She kept her hand there for a moment, then removed it. Temperature normalized, she said. Ivan nodded. Another instance changed. Yes. She stepped back. The room felt flatter, less layered, as if some of the small variations that had been building had begun to settle. Ivan crossed to the cabinet and opened it again. This time he took out the timing strip and placed it on the table, but did not activate it. He set it parallel to the drawer, then adjusted it by a fraction until it aligned with the table edge. Seelan watched. You're reintroducing a reference, she said. Yes. Why? To see if it changes the count. She considered that. Careful, she said. He nodded. They both watched the strip. Inactive. No markers. No movement. Just a line. After a few seconds, the drawer shifted. Not wider, not narrower. It aligned perfectly, flush with the table edge. The gap remained, but the angle corrected itself. The page inside now sat square. Seelan leaned forward slightly. Alignment, she said. Yes, triggered by the strip. Or by its position. She looked at the strip, then at the drawer, then back again. Remove it, she said. He did. He lifted the strip and set it aside. The drawer did not return to its previous angle. It stayed aligned. Persistent, he said. Yes. They both looked at the page. The text had not changed. Still. Update. Local observer count unstable. Recalculation in progress. Seelan exhaled slowly. Progress, she said. Not completion, Ivan replied. She nodded. They stood there, both aware that something was still in motion, even if the room itself had quieted. Then Seelan did something different. She walked to the sink and ran a small amount of water, just enough to wet her fingers. She returned to the table and touched one of the rings. The water spread across the surface. The ring blurred, not erased, just softened. Ivan stepped closer. State change, he said. Yes, not removal. Transformation. He watched the ring as it faded slightly at the edges. Do the others, he said. She did. One by one, each ring softened. None disappeared completely. When she finished, the table looked less defined. The circle still there, but no longer sharp. She dried her hands on the cloth. The cloth darkened slightly, then returned to its previous tone. Ivan looked at the drawer again. No movement. The page remained. The text unchanged. Try the cloth, he said. Seelan hesitated. Then she lifted it. Slowly. The gap beneath was visible again. The page inside. No shift. She folded the cloth once and set it aside. Exposure doesn't change it now, she said. No. Stabilized. Yes. They both stepped back again. The room felt quieter still. Less reactive. As if the accumulation had slowed. Ivan walked to the wall terminal and placed his hand on the power control. He did not turn it on. He just held it there. Seelan watched. Don't, she said. He nodded. I won't. He removed his hand. Another instance avoided. They returned to their positions on either side of the table. Standing. Watching. Not interacting. The drawer remained aligned. The page steady. The light constant. The air vent silent. After a long time, Seelan spoke. Read it again, she said. Ivan did. Update. Local observer count unstable. Recalculation in progress. He paused, then added, no date. Seelan nodded. No endpoint. He looked at her. Not yet. She considered that. Then she stepped forward. Not to the drawer. Not to the page. To the inspection sheet. Still face down. She reached for it. Ivan did not stop her. She turned it over. The writing was still there. Their lines. The oil stain. But something had shifted. The edges of the letters looked less sharp, as if the ink had begun to settle into the paper differently. She read the lines silently, then took the marker. Ivan watched. She hesitated, then wrote one more line. Do not finalize. She set the marker down, aligned it, stepped back. They both looked at the sheet, then at the drawer, then at the page. The text inside changed. Not immediately, but gradually. One word at a time. Seelan leaned in. Careful. She read it aloud. Update. Local observer count undefined. Process suspended. She straightened. Neither of them spoke. The light remained constant. The drawer did not move. The rings stayed softened. The room held. Ivan exhaled once. Slow. Suspended, he said. Yes. Not resolved. No. They both stood there, aware that the system, whatever it was, had not ended. It had paused. Seelan looked at the diary drawer. We haven't opened it again, she said. No. And it hasn't changed. No. She nodded. Then we leave it. He agreed. They both stepped back from the table. Not in retreat, just in distance. The room remained quiet, unchanged, for a while. Then, almost imperceptibly, the calibration strip at the edge of the table lifted again. Not much, just enough to break its flatness. Seelan noticed. Ivan did too. Neither of them moved to press it down. They watched it, held between states, like the drawer had been, like the system still was. The strip stayed lifted, not curling farther, not settling back. A pale edge raised from the metal by less than a finger's width, enough to catch the overhead light and hold it. Seelan looked at it for a long time. Then she pulled the unused chair farther from the table until its legs crossed the floor seam and stopped in a new position. No scrape this time. She had lifted it clear before setting it down. Ivan watched but said nothing. The archive room had become a place where small movements counted twice. Once his action, once his record. He seemed to be choosing now which kind of count he was willing to add to. Seelan returned to the wall and remained standing. Between them, the table kept its arrangement. The inverted cup, the softened rings. The inspection sheet turned face up again. The oil stain spread wider than before. The marker placed in line with the sheet's edge. The cloth folded small. The drawer not fully open, not fully closed. And inside it the inserted page, still visible through the narrow gap beside the evidence sleeve. The text had not changed since the last time they read it. Update. Local observer count undefined. Process suspended. Suspended was not comfort. It was simply less active than before. Ivan crossed to the terminal and crouched beside the lower access panel instead of touching the main controls. He removed the maintenance cover, checked the manual relay lights, then put the cover back without disconnecting anything. No propagation, he said. Seelan nodded. Still local. For now. He stood and leaned one shoulder against the wall. It was the first time she had seen him rest against anything since the diary had come into the room. Even now it looked provisional, as if he were borrowing the posture until a better one appeared. Seelan looked at the page in the drawer again. It knew how many we were. It knew how many were involved. She glanced at him. That's not the same thing. No. He left it there. The station clock on the wall changed its digits without sound. Seelan watched the numbers shift and, for the first time since the diary had been opened, did not try to connect them to anything. Not to the light. Not to the page. Not to the date in the book. She walked to the sink and rinsed the cup properly this time. When she turned it upright and set it back on the table, no new ring appeared. Ivan noticed. So, he said. So state matters, Seelan replied. Not only position. He came closer to look. The older rings remained, blurred at the edges, but the new placement of the cup left no mark at all. He did not touch it. Wet dry, he said. Open closed. Assigned unassigned. Observed recorded. Seelan looked at the diary drawer. Predicted produced. He did not answer immediately. Then yes. The word stayed between them. Not because it was dramatic, because it was plain enough to hold. Seelan went back to the table and lifted the inspection sheet. She read the lines they had written over the last hour or two, or whatever measure applied now. No external notice. Reassign visible tasks. Do not share source text. Observe without responding. Do not confirm patterns. Limit interaction scope. Disrupt accumulation paths. Do not finalize. A useful list. And an elegant list. Made in real time by two people who did not know enough, and had continued anyway. She turned the paper over and found the old oil stain on the reverse, the blurred recovery note, the timestamp that preceded descent. The mark had dried at the edges into a shape that looked almost deliberate. Ivan held out his hand. She gave him the sheet. He folded it once, following the existing crease. Then again. Then once more until it was a compact square. He did not put it in a drawer. He slid it into his shirt pocket. Seelan watched that. Why keep that and not the diary? It's ours, he said. She accepted the distinction. Then he walked to the drawer and stopped beside it. Seelan straightened but did not move closer. He looked down through the gap at the inserted page and the sleeve beneath it. I'm going to close it. She let a breath out through her nose. Will that finalize? I don't know. Then why do it? He kept his eyes on the drawer, because leaving it between states is also a state. That was true. She hated that it was true. He did not reach for the handle at once. He took the cloth instead and wrapped it once around his fingers. Not for protection exactly. More to interrupt direct contact. Then he placed 2 fingers on the metal edge and applied slow, even pressure. The left side dragged. The same reluctant motion as before. The The drawer moved inward 1 centimeter. Stopped. Then the last part of the mechanism caught, and it sealed with a soft click. Nothing else in the room changed. The light remained constant. The cup did not ring the surface. The vent stayed quiet. The strip at the edge of the table remained slightly lifted. Seelan waited. Ivan removed the cloth from his hand and set it beside the cup. He stayed standing next to the drawer, listening for some response that did not come. After a minute, Seelan said, "Open the outer chain." "No, not the text. The retrieval." He thought about it, then went to the terminal and powered only the narrow communications band, not the general system. The screen came up dimmer than before. He accessed the pilot's recovery log, the shuttle descent record, the relay shelter coordinates, plane items, separate items. Nothing grouped. The mismatch remained. Recovery logged 8 hours before descent. He opened the shuttle's atmospheric entry trace. That, too, remained normal. He checked surface camera stills from the relay shelter. A sequence of 6 images appeared, one after another. Broken hatch. Dust on the floor. Manual storage compartment beneath a wall bench. Foam cavity. Evidence sleeve. Book. The pilot's gloved hand. Seelan moved closer without realizing it. "What's wrong?" Ivan asked. She pointed. The first still showed the compartment before retrieval. Empty, except for dust lines and the rectangular impression where something had rested for a long time. The second showed the same compartment from a slightly lower angle. The book was there. No hand entering frame. No sleeve being placed. Just present, where the previous still showed absence. Ivan enlarged the timestamps beneath both images. 3 seconds apart. He opened the raw capture order. No missing frame. No transmission break. Seelan said. The record learned it backward. He was still looking at the images. Or the object did. She let that stand. He did not forward the stills. He did not even save a local copy. He shut the file, powered the band down again, and the screen went black. They were back with the room and its objects. Seelan glanced at the closed drawer. It survives by being found. Maybe. Not hidden. Found. He nodded once. She thought of the line in the diary. The one almost lost in the gutter. Ask who left the diary, where it could survive. Not who wrote it. Not who believed it. Who left it where survival was possible. Ivan walked to the wall by the door and checked the lockdown indicator. Still red. He lifted the manual release cover, hesitated, then closed it without touching the switch. "We can't stay in here through next cycle," he said. "No. If we leave it sealed and marked internal, someone else opens it." "Yes. If we move it, we create a transfer record." "Yes." He looked at the drawer, then at the old maintenance cabinet, then back at Seelan. "Paper," he said. She understood faster than she expected to. The diary had persisted through broken shelter, failed relay, wrong timestamps, and an archive system already beginning to organize around it. Digital containment was only another route by which it could be noticed, another way to be counted. But paper could disappear differently. Not erased, misfiled, boxed, labeled in a way that directed attention elsewhere. "Manual storage," she said. He nodded. Seelan crossed to the cabinet and opened the lowest compartment. Inside were old binders, polymer sleeves, calibration manuals for equipment no longer on station, a stitched maintenance ledger with 3 pages left unused. Dust had gathered in the hinge recesses. Ivan opened the archive drawer again. This time he did not pause. The motion dragged at the left side, and then released. He took out the evidence sleeve, removed the diary, and held it only long enough for Seelan to slide one of the dead equipment manuals from the cabinet onto the table. The manual was thicker, heavier, almost the same height. They did not speak while they worked. Seelan opened the manual to the middle and pressed a slight separation into its binding. Ivan placed the diary inside, not hidden by force. Nested. The cover vanished between pages dense with obsolete repair procedures. Seelan closed the manual and ran her hand once over the front. The title on the cover read, Thermal Regulator Fault Trees, Revision 2. No one would choose that first. She returned it to the lowest cabinet shelf, between 2 binders swollen by age. Ivan slid the cabinet shut and turned the old mechanical latch. No digital record. No transfer. The empty evidence sleeve went back into the archive drawer. The foam cradle beneath it still held the shape of the missing book. Seelan looked at the drawer, then closed it. This time it moved smoothly. She frowned faintly at that. Ivan noticed, but neither of them commented. The station clock advanced another minute. The strip at the table edge settled flat. Seelan saw it happen. She did not go to press it down. It no longer needed it. For a while they remained where they were, watching the room return to ordinary proportions. The light overhead resumed a faint hum. The vent gave one metallic tick and began its low air rush again. The cup stood upright, without marking the table. The softened rings faded further until they became only discolorations you might attribute to poor cleaning. Ivan removed the folded inspection sheet from his pocket. He looked at it, then handed it to Seelan. She took it to the sink, held it under a thin stream of water, and waited until the ink broke apart and the oil stain bled outward into nothing readable. She pressed the pulp flat against the drain screen until it thinned, then let it go. No ceremony. She dried her hands. Ivan unlocked the door. The red line above the frame disappeared. Neither of them opened it immediately. Seelan put the empty cup back in the cabinet. Ivan straightened the marker on the table, then slid it into the drawer with the other archive tools. He adjusted the chair he had never used, so it no longer crossed the floor seam. Small corrections. Not undoing. Just leaving less behind. At last Seelan opened the door. The corridor outside looked the same as it always had. Bright. Dry. Too clean at the corners. A maintenance cart stood half visible at the far end. Somewhere beyond the bend, someone laughed once and then stopped, either because the conversation ended or because they had reached a door. Seelan stepped out first. Ivan switched off the archive light and followed her. He pulled the door nearly closed, then glanced once through the narrowing gap to confirm the table, the drawer, the cabinet, the chairs, everything in place. Then he shut it. No sound but the latch. They walked down the corridor without speaking. At the intersection, Seelan slowed and looked toward medical. Ivan looked toward external survey. Their task assignments on a local board no longer mattered. Perhaps they never had. Perhaps they had mattered exactly enough. Seelan reached into her pocket and found her fingers empty. She had forgotten she no longer had the sheet. Ivan noticed the gesture. He did not ask. At the intersection, they parted without arrangement. Seelan went left. Ivan went right. Behind them, beyond two sealed doors and a wall panel that hummed slightly off pitch, the old maintenance cabinet kept its shelf of neglected manuals. One of them was a little heavier than its spine suggested. No alarm sounded. No message followed them. Under the station's ordinary light, with the air moving again through the vents and the floor seams catching chair legs in other rooms,